I just want to say good morning. My name is Jim Atkinson. I am the Director of Programs and Services at ArtPride, New Jersey, and we'll be helping out with today's webinar. We have a pretty full agenda, so we'll get into it in just a moment. But before we do, I want to let folks know that closed captioning is available using the closed captioning button along the bottom of your screen. And you can go ahead and use the Q&A function if you have any questions during the webinar today. I'll be fielding those and can direct them to the appropriate person. Also, keep your eye on the chat, as we may be using that as a place to drop important links or other information we'll be sharing. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Anne Marie Miller, ArtPride's Director of Advocacy and Public Policy, and she will be walking us through the advocacy update for this morning. So go ahead, Anne Marie.
Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. And Jim, if you can move to the next slide, that would be great. So we're going to start off with state stuff. And this week, the big announcement was that the State Arts Council announced $3.6 million in capital arts grants to help arts organizations throughout the state address capital needs. Everything from making venues more accessible to repairs and construction. So next slide. This is the list. I think there's 38 organizations, and you can see it's over a little bit over $3.6 million. And we're excited, and we're even more excited that the money exists to be able to do this. So this is due to the increase of funding last fiscal year. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. All right. So here's you can get a little bit of a preview here, and was alluded in sort of the email that went out about the advocacy update this year. We're waiting for a bill number on a bill that's been drafted over at the Office of Legislative Services, which is an act appropriating federal funds from the American Rescue Plan to the New Jersey Economic Development Authority to support arts and culture organizations impacted by the COVID pandemic. It's a total of $70 million that's being asked for. And this is like it's talking about the creative industries, which includes nonprofits and for-profit arts and cultural venues. It would be administered through the Economic Development Authority in consultation with the State Arts Council. Again, this is all preview. We're waiting for that bill number. $50 million would support financial recovery, resilience, growth of arts and culture organizations, helping to offset revenue losses that occurred during the pandemic, and to provide cash reserves necessary to ensure continued operations in light of possible future setbacks. So this is to help recoup some of the loss that occurring on an ongoing basis, and also to prevent shutdowns in the future, and to help us all be more resilient. $10 million of the total would be going to arts education organizations, and then $20 million to qualifying arts and culture organizations to support completion of creative placemaking projects. So stay tuned. We hope we have a bill number this week, in which case we'll be letting everyone know how to reach out to their legislators to get them to co-sponsor this bill and to propel it through the legislative process. We have a short window. Budget season actually ends, end of June, beginning of July, at the very latest. So not sure this is going to make it through that time period. We're going to have to really ramp up, but it's a start. So next slide, please. Meanwhile, in Washington, this is kind of like in the weeds, but on Tuesday, the House began voting on the reauthorization of the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, known as WIOA, just in case you didn't know. This is really important because it's the first ever inclusion of creative economy among programmatic direction, and is expected to include a request for the Department of Labor to conduct a study on the use of creative skills in high demand industries. So it's inroads. We're making slow inroads. The House began voting on the reauthorization. There is not yet scheduled a Senate reauthorization. Again, these are starting points, but all reasons for us to be involved in the process and to at least know what's going on. Next slide, please. So National Endowment actually offered 1.5 million in spring 2022 grants. This is the New Jersey allocation. I highlighted ArtPride received $25,000 to help with our content management, our digital content, and getting the word out about what's going on all over the state. And the State Arts Council partnership grant is over $1 million. I think that's a high mark for them as well. You should know that, besides that $1 million going to the State Arts Council, the majority of which gets re-granted to arts organizations throughout the state. So that'll be a big bonus for local arts organizations as well. The list, it's interesting, NEA does this alphabetically, I think, by the town, not by the name of the organization. So I just put that up there. It's a little bit difficult to sort out. But we'll have this in the slide deck. Next slide, please. So just reminding everybody, it's really important. The primary elections coming up June for all these reasons that I just talked about. The state voting, the voter website is there. There's really no excuse this year. You can still apply for a mail-in ballot by May 31st. There is early voting that includes Saturday and Sunday this year for the first time from June 3rd to June 5th. Before the in-person June 7th, you can drop your ballots in boxes all over the state. And so please make sure you vote. Next slide. And coming up this week is the Governor's Awards in Arts Education. There will be that's at 4:30 over at the War Memorial. The new Arts Ed Census results will be released at 2 o'clock before the Governor's Awards. The Governor's Awards this year, Bob Morrison from Arts Ed New Jersey, as you may know, is leaving Arts Ed New Jersey and is receiving an outstanding lifetime contribution to arts education award at the Governor's Awards. We're really looking forward to it. ArtPride will be honoring 4 New Jersey thespians, 2 of whom attended our congressional meetings and 2 that won an essay contest talking about arts advocacy. Next slide, please. The Thrive Arts Conference is coming up June 16th over at the Lewis Arts Complex at Princeton University. You can register at artpridenj.org/thrive, and then the Whova app, you can register there as well and download it. You can download it for both mobile and for desktop, and it's great. It has a lot of really good features, so I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to register as soon as possible. And I think that's it from me. And I am going to toss this over to Cie Stroud in our office, who's going to conduct the rest of the webinar. Thanks, Cie.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. We have a treat for you on this webinar today, which is we have 3 contributors for Jersey Arts, all of whom are delightful and make amazing pieces for us. Jersey Arts, or Discover Jersey Arts, is a endeavor in audience development that's produced in partnership with the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. Next slide. And what this looks like is articles, it's a series of articles, podcasts, and videos that ArtPride produces at our expense, our time, effort, and well, not just ours, it's the contributors. Next slide. They are distributed on jerseyarts.com website. There's a new one now, e-newsletter. They're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The podcasts go out on Buzzsprout, and they go out to different distributors like Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and the videos can be found on YouTube. Some thumbnails at the bottom there of that media. The goal of Jersey Arts is to amplify the arts. Jim, if you could go to the next slide. To increase the awareness, to encourage discussion, participation, attendance, and ticket sales. They are a preview. They're meant to be advertising. They're not meant to be a record, an archive. And again, this is all at ArtPride's expense. The authoring, the production, the placements. Jim, if you could go to the next slide. The content, we have a priority of covering members who are members of ArtPride. And if you're not a member of ArtPride, you can join for free if you haven't been a member before. You can find that link on our website. Maybe Jim can put it in the chat. And we cover the grantees of the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, Jersey performers. We intend for the content to be as diverse as possible, to cover venues all over the states, every kind of arts, every subject matter, all the different kinds of performers, all the different kinds of audiences. ArtPride has made a commitment to get equitable access to the arts for everyone, and a commitment to include historically excluded or underrepresented people. Jim, if you could go to the next slide. The timing of these pieces, we tried to put out two a week in the e-newsletter, New and Now. And if we could work backward from there, what happens is I try to get these published a week before any pertinent event dates, so that there's enough advertising time, lead time for them to be seen on different media. Prior to that, I give them a once over after getting them from the contributors who could spend, a week, 2 or 3 putting them together. That's after they interview the subjects and after they've gone through the painstaking process of scheduling interviews with the subject, especially if there's multiple subjects. There's 3 contributors here today to speak to you, and we'd like to talk about what makes a good story. Jim, yeah, thank you. Certainly there has to be a Jersey angle. Here's Maddie, here's Eileen coming on. Gina's next, there's Gina. Right, has to have a Jersey angle. We need access to the subjects, as I just mentioned. And then I realized they can be in different places and working on multiple projects at the same time. Subjects who make for good interviewees. That could be a whole host of things. That a large audience can experience the art. A workshop for 5 people that's 2 hours long does not invite the rest of New Jersey to join them. Art that addresses current topics. Art, is art imitating life or life imitating art? And if the organization is having an event that is their event of the year, doesn't have to be an anniversary, it could be their biggest effort, their most pertinent effort. The contributors are going to speak about, well, if we go to the next slide, Jim, we just get their Oh, yes, this is what all of us need in terms of access. We need, I try to step out of the way. I try and hook up the subjects and the contributors directly. They need phone numbers, they need email addresses, we need websites for all the artists because we like to include links to them in our website. We need still images of exhibits and artists' portraits. We need B-roll from theater performances. We can shoot B-roll too. If we shoot it, we'll share it with you. We need photo captions. We need photographer credits. During the production process, actually before, during, and after, we might need to reach out for clarifications. And just delays come in different forms, but delays are not just missing deadlines. Delays are missing those 2 spots, those 2 weekly spots. So missing those spots means reducing the amount of advertising that can be done in advance, and therefore reducing, achieving of our goal. The 3 contributors we have with us today are Ilene Dube. She's going to speak about articles. She's a prolific writer. Gina Marie Rodriguez. She's going to speak about videos. Hi, Gina. And Maddie Wharton, who used to be an ArtPride staffer, who does videos as well, and a significant amount of podcasts. So they're going to speak about what makes a good story, specifically the advantages to their different mediums and unique production issues, but overall, what makes a good story. So Ilene, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I mostly write about the visual arts, and what makes a good story is a difficult thing, but like a wonderful exhibit is not necessarily a good story. So what makes a good story? It's usually the people, and of course they have to be accessible. Both available as well as speak in an accessible way. The story is more interesting if the people are unique in some way, if what they're doing is unique. And of course, every story has an arc in which something happens. And as Cie mentioned, it's great if it relates to the world that we live in. We're living through some really difficult times, and as we all know, the arts helps us to process the events. What makes a good story to one person is not always what makes a great story to somebody else. So it's pretty hard to define. That's the best I can do it in the time allotted. And then also, a story is more than just the text. It has to have great images. If it has video with it, even better. And we need great captions and photo credits for those images. So that's basically it.
Okay,
Sorry,
jump in real
muted.
quick here. There's a couple questions coming in, so we can
Oh.
take a break and we can field a few questions. So one question's coming in regarding at what point do you need materials? They're assuming it's after the program is selected for a feature, but they'd like to know more about what format they want to receive information about the programs. Do you like press releases? Do you like things like that? And I'm assuming this is referencing pitching stories, which would go directly to you, Cie, correct?
Yes, there's a link, maybe Jim can put that in the chat, where you can submit, you can pitch a story. And you don't have to spend too much effort on that. You can just send us a link and I'll do the research. And yeah, we don't need photos or videos up front, although they really do help. I mean, I'm assuming where I'm clicking through to has them. But if not, you know, if the website's in production, which has happened, or the page for that production has not been posted yet, go ahead and just stick them in the pitch, or you could email them to me at Cie Stroud at artpridenewjersey.org.
Okay, we also, well, that answers the second question we had, which is where do we send the content? So yeah, all pitches for the stories would go directly to Cie, as she mentioned, and I'll drop her email in the chat in a second as well. And then Cie acts as a features editor, really, an assignment editor, and figuring out, you know, what stories are going to get covered, and then she assigns out those stories to, you know, to the various content contributors, 3 of whom are here with us today, but we have about 9 others that work with us. So, and then there's another question saying, who are we targeting this to? Don't most groups have someone doing PR? So I think we need a little more definition about what I know you covered a little bit this earlier, but if you could talk a little bit more about who we're targeting the features to.
Yes, a lot of the organizations have PR people or staff who get the word out, but hey, this is free. Why not capitalize on it? You know, ArtPride is using the hashtag Jersey Arts. You know, if you promote your own things, you can include it, but you know, certainly if it's coming from the source, it's easily to find, you know, on the website and our media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah, and I think just based on a couple questions I'm seeing, just for clarification, so these are not, so folks like Maddie and Ilene and Gina Marie, who were with us today, actually are doing content directly for us that we're creating under the Discover Jersey Arts brand. These are not things that we're pitching to outside publications. So just for clarification there, just wanted to make sure everybody was clear about that. Okay, so yeah, let's keep going. I just wanted to get a few of those questions in before we kept moving along. So,
Gina, you want to go next?
I guess so. So I'm actually relatively new to the organization, and because of that, that means that I've been working through COVID times. So most of my videos, actually up until this point, all of my videos have been remote, which means unique to me is Zoom interviews, which is always interesting. I think it's important to mention that, especially with the hike in COVID cases right now, if we're to continue doing remote videos, lighting is important for the interviewees. I've spoken to a few people who forget that they need a light source when I'm speaking to them, so they are hard to see themselves. I don't know if you can hear, but I have someone cutting down a tree next door to me. So it's also really important to find a quiet space. This is the best I could do, so I'm hoping that you can't hear that. But the same goes for all of my contributors. If they can find a quiet space. Most recently, I interviewed the cast of Cats, who happened to be getting all of their COVID testing during my interview. So I heard everything in the background, which unfortunately couldn't make the final cut. So these are really important things if you want what you're saying to be included in the final cut of your interview. I need to be able to hear you. Oh, I don't know what else I should say. So if anybody has a question, that would be great. That's it for me for now.
I'm happy to jump in if
So
yeah, I think in addition to what Gina said, which is so true with with the remote stuff, the audio and the visual piece of it. So I do both the video and the podcast piece. I think that one of the challenges is probably figuring out whether the story that you're bringing to us, and this is probably going to, you know, land on Cie's shoulders anyway, but whether you're pitching a video, a podcast, or a feature story. And I think Cie will probably sort that out. But generally, obviously, if it's a video story, then the visuals are fantastic in addition to the audio and everything else. Podcast wise, we've been doing, or more recently anyway, I've been doing sort of like long form interviews. So the most recent one I did was with Sarah Rasmussen, the new artistic director at McCarter, because that sort of format, we didn't really need any visual to talk about her background in art and how she developed into an artistic director. And it allowed us to go super long form and get very personal. So the podcasts are usually 20 to 30 minutes, whereas the videos are somewhere around the 5 to 6 minute range. So if it's something like Gina was saying, like cats, then that's the perfect video because you have the visuals and everything else, and you don't need to dig super, super deep for 20 to 30 minutes with, you know, an entire cast as opposed to with one person. The other things that that I think Ilene mentioned, you know, specifically if there's like a peg related to what's going on in the news or in the world, that's always really helpful. If there's a particularly interesting human interest story with your show, that's always interesting. And just in general, the other thing I wanted to say to Jim's point in terms of, you know, our role here is partially just filling the gaps of the sort of missing arts coverage that has sort of been slowly depleted over time. So, you know, if this is the sort of thing that you would have been going to NJ.com or the Times or NJPBS with, and, you know, that's the role that we're looking to take on and really get the story out there so that it's not coming from you, it's coming from an objective third party, but with your deadlines and ticket sales in mind.
There are a couple questions coming in. So I think this is primarily for you, Cie, is about lead time. So the question is your lead time still 1 month? And how long should we leave before you've done a feature on your organization? So I think they're trying to ask like how long in between stories is reasonable. Like if you just got coverage, how long should you wait? So there's two questions built in there. One around how far in advance and one around how far between stories you'd be eligible.
So between setting up the interview, doing the interview, producing the piece, editing it, advertising it, it does add up. It adds up to like 2 months. The stories can come out faster. Perhaps the videos take the most coordination. And yeah, if we've covered you recently, we really ought not to cover you because, you know, I've only been with ArtPride for what, 2 months, and I can tell you, even though I've been a journalist in New Jersey for like almost 2 decades, the state has never felt smaller and bigger at the same time, right? You can drive from one end to the other, but if you look at the number of arts organizations that are jam-packed into New Jersey, it's a lot. So rather not cover you twice. So again, think about the key event for your organization and pitch that one and pitch it in advance. And we all realize that, you know, because these are previews, your piece is a work in progress. And we are sending professionals to make a polished piece about your work in progress. Have no worries there.
Yeah, and here's a question I think maybe for Gina. Gina, they were asking if you have any specific suggestions for lighting if you're doing remote interviews.
Oh, sure. I mean, when I say lighting, I don't necessarily expect anybody to have a professional light setup, but if you have a ring light, that can help you out. Just having an overhead light it's not the greatest, but if you have it, that's helpful. A window, natural light is wonderful. But the problem in the past was floor lamps that are too far from you that aren't actually casting light on your face. That becomes an issue. When I've done remote interviews with stage productions, I ask if they're able to use the stage while it's in use, because usually you have a lighting crew there who is lighting you. So I've taken advantage of that before. There are ways around it, just as long as you are lit and people can see you, which you can tell when you're on Zoom if you can see yourself well or not. That's all I mean by lighting. I don't expect it to be a professional setup on Zoom.
And then what about audio for those kind of interviews?
For those kind of interviews, again, finding the quietest space. If there are other people in the room with you, that's probably not the best space because I can hear them speaking behind you. But having like headphones will help as well with a mic. Or if you have an external mic on your laptop, that'll help you out as well. Yeah, it's really coming down to filtering out the external noise. So again, if you are using a window as a light source, make sure it's shut, that I don't hear everything coming through the window. I understand that Zoom is just a very weird medium. We're all really familiar with that now. So it's the best that you can do under certain circumstances.
And Maddie, how does that translate to podcast when you're doing, because they're mostly remote podcasts, right?
Yeah, they pretty much mostly are, because it's the most expeditious way of doing it, although I'm always open to doing it in person. Yeah, so I record in my closet. It is a really nice tight space that is naturally insulated by all of the clothes. And that gets me the best sound that I can get in my apartment. So I recommend that if you have, you know, a walk-in closet that has that kind of space, or if you have a small room that you're able to tamp down on the noise with, you know, blankets, curtains, yeah, something that's comfortable, but that you can really sort of keep contained. And then, you know, the only other thing I'd say is like, sometimes you're not aware of the ambient noise that's there. So like, obviously things like dishwashers and washing machines, but also like HVAC systems, or if you have a, you know, an air conditioning unit that kicks on very loudly, you don't want to be anywhere near that. So it's figuring out where you can be comfortable for like 45 minutes, but also not getting ambient noise.
And just for clarity too, as Cie mentioned, when folks are sent out on location, we're sending videographers there. So we're not expecting, you know, them to worry about it on location. This is more just for the remote stuff.
If I could add, the writers, you know, even Ilene needs a good soundbite, right? And the more live interviews that can be had, the better. You know, the gallery manager, several of the artists, the curator, anyone that the writers can speak to directly, those sound bites help too.
Yeah, and even if there's video, right, they can pitch, if they have B-roll, they can pitch video, because even though obviously it won't be in the written story, when it appears online, you can drop video clips in online too, or audio, or depending on what it is. So there's another question specifically for Ilene is, do you write specifically about the visual arts, or do you write about other arts as well?
Mostly I write about the visual arts, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be something else that I wouldn't write about. I know that's a very general answer, but mostly I write about the visual arts. But Cie, you have other writers who write about theater and
music, literature. Yeah. Well, a good writer is a good writer, you know, a good interviewer too. But the writers do have their preferences. They do have the areas where they shine. So
here's another question coming: if the podcasts ever cover the literary arts or poetry? It's a question coming in.
I think, you know, I'm open to covering anything. It's a matter of whether it falls under our purview. So if Cie feels it falls under, you know, the requirements, if it's an organization that we cover, then absolutely, that'd be great.
I think we recently, not long ago, did a podcast, I believe. I think, Cie, right before you came on board, I think we did a podcast on someone who was a beat poet, I believe. So the answer to that's yes, I think, right?
Yeah, I just assigned yesterday a story to a writer about a storytelling group, and I did struggle with whether that was a podcast or a story. But specific to that group is that they're kind of reorganizing and celebrating an anniversary and having a workshop. They have a community projects director who's relatively new. And so speaking kind of diving into what they're up to and formulating that and putting that on paper seemed like the way to go.
Okay. And just to amplify, as ArtPride's working on a new version of jerseyarts.com, which will be launching later in the year, this kind of content is kind of rising to the top and becoming kind of the quote unquote hero of the website. So there'll be more and more of this type of content being published as the years look forward. There'll be seeing more and more of these feature stories and podcasts and video packages. So another question come in, do you cover art marketing and artist professional development?
Well, that storytelling piece does include efforts they are doing for professional development. The thing with professional development, the few pitches I've seen in the few weeks I've been here is that they're not accessible to a large number of people. Certainly if we cover it, it would get more accessibility or more awareness, but there wouldn't be too much participation.
Right.
That could be
These are
had.
primarily consumer. This is business to consumer, right? So this is about what the consumer can do. It's not industry, like business to business kind of stuff.
I'm sorry, I guess I don't understand the question.
Oh, they were just asking about professional development opportunities. Like, would we cover that? I think that might be more of a Voices for the Field type story.
Oh, yeah.
Blog
Voices
story,
from, Voices from the Field can be seen on the ArtPride website.
Right. So it's a totally different product.
Those are not from the contributors, but from people in the industry we've asked to write about something they're involved with.
Okay, I think we've covered all the questions regarding this, and given one more chance to see if anybody has any final questions for our team that's with us today. Okay, if not, again, do you want to talk any more about lead time as it varies from one medium to another? Because it's different, right? For a video than a podcast versus a feature story. How much time they take, right?
Ilene, how much lead time would you like for a story?
Yeah, the thing is that it's not that it takes me 2 months to write a story, but as you can imagine, we all have a schedule of things down the pike. So, if you've got a big event that you'd love to have coverage of that's happening, 6 months from now, it wouldn't hurt to, just give us a heads up. So we know to put that in our schedule.
Okay, and there's another question here just about how to get on the podcast. Like, how do you get featured on the podcast?
Certainly pitch the story, and we'll make sure it's podcast specific as opposed to a video or an article. And it depends on the timeliness and the availability of the contributors. And there's a lot of factors that go into it.
I did want to clarify just one thing about the timing, because I know that we're all saying like, give us 2 months. And I think that that's true. And, the other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that all of us have multiple jobs. So if, it's not that we need 2 months to machinate over how we're going to put together this, 30-minute podcast. It's that we have to slot it in with other jobs as well. But all of this is to say that, that's what helps us say, oh, I know that the #1 story out of Crossroads this year is going to be happening in June. And so I'm going to leave a week in my schedule for that. However, if for some reason on Monday you find out that Bruce Springsteen is going to be doing a surprise set at NJ Pack, call us. Because I think, I don't want to scare people away with the 2 months lead time thing either. That's our preference, and that's what helps us really secure the fact that you're going to get coverage for the story that you absolutely want coverage for in a perfect world. but I mean, we're still news people. And if you have something that's amazing, that's a surprise and you didn't anticipate, I don't think we want to miss that opportunity necessarily either. And so if we can make something work, and see, I don't want to speak out of turn, but that's correct, right? I mean, like if something amazing is about to happen,
yeah, and I say 2 months lead time, but I've only been here 2 months, right? And so how many times have I picked up the phone and said, hey, can you do this like by Monday? And it's happened. So yeah,
the 2 months lead time is really more, it's more for everybody to have like a cohesive, not stressed, perfect version of the story, and to know that we're able to do it. But I don't want anybody to hesitate. Like I said, if Bruce Springsteen's coming over, please call me.
Great. A couple other last questions coming in before we wrap up this piece of the webinar are all your stories attached to events?
No, we do artist profiles, which are, yeah, can be timeless. They can run for years and still be fascinating.
But usually, correct? I mean, typically there are previews for events, right?
Yeah, because the goal is to encourage participation in the arts, right?
And even
Enjoyment in the
for a
arts.
profile, there would, typically be a news peg to it, like, the new director of a museum or something like that.
Mhm.
Right. Something actionable for the consumer to go do, right?
Yeah, I mean, they don't actually need to be a New Jersey artist if they're just important to the people of New Jersey. That's coverage worthy too.
Okay, and then one last question we'll field here before we turn it back to Anne Marie is: do we ever accept pre-produced podcasts from other people? That would probably be a no, right?
Not to my knowledge.
We don't do that,
no.
correct? Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So all the content we produce is produced by our team. So thank you. Thank you all. I'm sorry, Ilene, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So, I mean, for example, as everybody mentioned, we would put a link in a story. So if we're, well, to get back to the profile idea, if we're, writing a profile of an artist or a curator, and that person has just done a podcast that, illuminates them, we might include that link.
Right, that's a good point. Thank you. So thank you to Cie and Maddie and Ilene and Gina Marie for joining us this morning. And Amber, I'm going to turn it back to you. We did have one question from earlier in your presentation as to whether or not the Governor's Awards will be live streamed on Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah, I posted in the chat, and actually, there's also now a 1 hour countdown starting at 2:30, and they go live at 3:30 with a red carpet countdown. So for the Governor's Awards, they've really got it down. And I want to make one thing really clear before the last announcement, that if Bruce Springsteen is doing a surprise set, you call me first, okay? So the next webinar is Thursday, July 14th. We're doing it on Thursday instead of Friday in the summertime. It's at 10 o'clock a.m. You can register at artpridej.org/events. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Cie. Thanks to our content providers. Thank you, Jim, for stepping in on this. And we'll see you next month.